A while back, I was in my kitchen, phone in my hand, staring at a text I didn't want to send. It was simple. Hey, I'm sorry. I got defensive. Can we talk? My thumb hovered there like the button was wired to an alarm system, and I felt that old familiar surge of armor. Don't send it. Stay tough. Don't give anyone the chance to see you unsure. And right under that armor was the louder story. If you're vulnerable, you'll get hurt. If you admit you care, you'll lose control. If you step forward, someone will judge you. Here's the thing I've learned from research and from living. You can't get to love, belonging, creativity, trust, or real leadership without walking through vulnerability. There is no other door. Daring greatly isn't a grand personality trait. It's showing up. It's letting yourself be seen. It's stepping into the arena of your life, even when you know there will be risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. And yes, critics show up. Sometimes they're outside of us. Often they're inside of us. But the people who live wholeheartedly are not the people who avoid the arena. They're the people who choose it anyway. So today I'm not talking about heroic bravery. I'm talking about the everyday kind, the kind that happens before lunch, the kind that looks small but changes everything. Vulnerability is courage in real life. And I know that might sound like one of those nice, inspiring sentences you put on a sticky note and forget about, but I mean it in the most practical, let's live our lives kind of way. Because when I say vulnerability, I'm not talking about oversharing or collapsing into a puddle of emotion on the floor. I'm talking about the very specific moment when you are facing uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, and you choose to show up anyway. Most of us grew up with a totally different definition. We learned that vulnerability equals weakness. That if you let people see your fear, your need, your love, your hope, your disappointment, you're handing them ammunition. It's like we were taught that the safest way to live is to stay in control, stay polished, stay untouchable. And the thing is, I get it. Our brains are wired to avoid pain. So vulnerability feels like standing in the middle of the street without armor. Of course, it feels risky. But here's what the research and the stories keep telling me. The people who love the most, who feel the most connected, who create, lead, and live wholeheartedly, they are not the people who are immune to fear. They're the people who have decided that fear is not the boss of their choices. They're the people who step into the arena of their lives, even with shaky knees, even with a loud inner critic, even without a guarantee of success. Think about what courage looks like in everyday life. It's saying, I miss you first. It's apologizing without knowing how the other person will respond. It's raising your hand in a meeting when you're not totally sure your idea is perfect. It's setting a boundary and letting someone be disappointed. It's trying something new when you might fail. It's letting yourself be seen when part of you wants to disappear. That's vulnerability, and that's courage. And the reason this matters so much is because vulnerability is not the path to what we want. It is the doorway. You can't get to love without risking heartbreak. You can't feel belonging without the possibility of being rejected. You can't create without the chance of being criticized. You can't lead without the risk of being wrong. There is no innovation, no intimacy, no joy, no change without that uncertain step forward. So the question is not, how do I live without vulnerability? The question is, how do I live brave enough to carry it? Now, I want to name something here because it trips people up. Being vulnerable does not mean you spill your guts to the nearest stranger. Vulnerability needs boundaries. It needs wisdom. It needs trust. Courage is not, I tell everyone everything. Courage is, I choose honesty with the right people in the right moments for the right reasons. That's how we stay open without feeling unsafe. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, but why does it still feel like weakness? Because vulnerability is the opposite of what our culture rewards. The world cheers for perfection, certainty, and performance. Vulnerability says, I'm here, I'm human, and I don't have this all figured out. That is not weakness. That is the kind of truth that makes real connection possible. So when we talk about daring greatly in everyday life, we start right here. We stop asking vulnerability to be comfortable. We stop waiting to be fearless. We decide that courage is showing up with our whole hearts, even when there's risk. And once you start practicing that, once you start stepping into the arena like that, you'll notice something else too. The armor you've been carrying starts to feel heavier. than the fear you're trying to avoid. Armor protects us from pain, but it also blocks everything we want. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, right? Because armor is the thing we reach for when we're trying to survive. It's the thing that says, I'm not doing this again. I'm not getting hurt again. I'm not looking foolish again. Armor feels like wisdom when we're scared. It feels like strength when we're tired. It feels like control when life is uncertain. So if you've been wearing it, I'm not here to shame that. I'm here to say, yeah, me too. I get it. But here's what I want you to notice. Armor doesn't just show up in dramatic moments. It shows up in tiny, everyday ways that look normal on the outside. It can look like perfectionism. Like if I do everything right, nobody can criticize me. It can look like staying busy so you never have to feel what's underneath. It can look like sarcasm that keeps people at a safe distance. It can look like being the helper who never asks for help. It can look like numbing out with scrolling, food, work, whatever helps you not be fully present to your own life. It can look like pretending you don't care so no one can see that you do. And the tricky part is that all of those things usually get rewarded. People call you strong, reliable, low maintenance, productive, funny, easygoing, so together. Meanwhile, inside, you're exhausted. Armor is heavy, and most of us don't realize how heavy it is until we try to take it off. Because armor is a full-time job. It takes energy to stay perfect. It takes energy to stay in control. It takes energy to manage everybody's expectations. It takes energy to keep your heart protected. And the cost of that energy is often the very life we say we want. I want you to think about it like this. Armor is designed to protect you from being hurt, but it also protects you from being seen. And being seen is the whole point of connection. You can't be loved for who you are if you're hiding who you are. You can't belong if you're showing up as a version you think will be accepted. You can't be creative if you're terrified of judgment. You can't feel joy if you're numbing everything that might hurt. Armor deadens the painful stuff, yes, but it also deadens the beautiful stuff. It's like trying to live with a thick blanket wrapped around your whole nervous system. Nothing gets in, but nothing really gets out either. And here's what's so sneaky about armor. It promises safety, but it delivers loneliness. It promises control, but it delivers anxiety. It promises never again, and then quietly hands us a smaller life, a life where we're managing, not living, performing, not connecting, surviving, not daring. Now, I'm not saying we just rip it off overnight. That's not how this works. Armor is usually built from real experiences: heartbreak, betrayal, failure, being laughed at, being told you were too much or not enough. So the goal isn't to shame the armor. The goal is to get curious about it, to notice when it shows up, to ask, what is this protecting me from right now? And what is it costing me right now? Because that question is where change starts. And when we begin to choose vulnerability, even in small ways, and we're not choosing to be reckless, we're choosing to be alive. We're choosing to say, I'm willing to feel this, because what I want on the other side matters more than staying closed. And that's the moment where daring greatly stops being a concept and starts becoming a life. Scarcity and shame are the biggest threats to daring greatly. And if that feels dramatic, I promise you it's not. I wish it were. I wish the biggest threat to courage was something obvious, something we could point to outside of ourselves and say, well, that's the problem. But scarcity and shame are sneaky. They're quiet. They live in the background of our everyday thinking, like a low hum, so constant that we start to believe it's just the truth. Scarcity is that never enough feeling, not enough time, not enough money, not enough patience, not enough success, not enough certainty, not enough love. And the most dangerous version of it is the one that turns inward. I'm not enough, not smart enough, not thin enough, not talent enough, not brave enough, not worthy enough. Scarcity takes a normal human moment of uncertainty and turns it into a verdict about who we are. It says, if you don't do this perfectly, you don't belong. So if you fail, you are a failure. If someone is disappointed in you, you are disappointing. And once scarcity is driving, we stop living our lives and start managing our image. Then shame jumps in. Shame is not the same thing as guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. Shame doesn't want you to learn or grow. Shame wants you to hide. It wants you quiet, small, and disconnected. And it is ruthless in how it talks to us. It shows up right after you risk something, right after you speak up, right after you set a boundary, right after you try. It whispers, who do you think you are? That was stupid. You're going to get found out. You're too much. You're not enough. And here's why this matters for daring greatly. Nobody wakes up and says, you know what? Today I'm going to live a smaller life. That's not how it happens. What happens is that scarcity creates the fear of not measuring up, of not being safe, of not being wanted, and shame offers the solution. Hide, perfect, perform, please, prove. And those solutions look like armor. They look like a life where you stay in the cheap seats, criticizing yourself, critiquing others, never stepping fully into the arena because the risk feels too high. I want to say this really clearly. Most of us don't stop being brave because we lack courage. We stop because we're afraid of the emotional aftermath. We're afraid of what shame will do to us if it doesn't work out. We're afraid of that inner conversation that turns one hard moment into a whole identity. And that's why the courage to be vulnerable is so rare. Not because we don't want connection or creativity or love, but because we're trying to avoid the pain of not enough. So what do we do with that? First, we name it. We learn to recognize scarcity when it starts talking, when that voice ramps up and says, everyone else has it together except you, or if you need help, you're weak, or if you don't get this right, you're done. We pause and say, oh, this is scarcity. Just naming it lowers its power. Second, we understand shame for what it is, a universal human experience, not a personal defect. If you're in the arena of your life, you will feel shame, period. There is no shame-free path to wholehearted living. The goal isn't to avoid it. The goal is to build shame resilience. And shame resilience starts with empathy. Shame cannot survive being spoken and met with understanding. That's why silence is shame's favorite weapon. When we tell the truth to someone safe and they meet us with, me too, you're not alone, you're human, shame starts to unravel. We move from I am not enough to I'm struggling and I'm still worthy of love and belonging. That is daring greatly right there. Not never feeling scarcity or shame, but refusing to let them be the architects of your life. Shame resilience grows through empathy, not toughness. And I know that can feel counterintuitive because most of us were raised on some version of suck it up and power through. Don't let them see you cry. Be strong. We were taught that the way to handle shame, that hot, shrinking feeling that says, oh, something is wrong with me, Mom, is to outwork it, outsmart it, or outrun it. Like if we just get tougher, more impressive, more put together, shame will back off. But shame doesn't back off when we get tougher. Shame gets smarter. It just changes costumes. If you succeed, shame says, yeah, but you won't keep it up. If you're praised, shame says, they don't really know you. If you're strong for everyone else, shame says, don't you dare need anything. So the old strategy of toughness becomes this exhausting treadmill. You keep proving and performing, and shame keeps moving the finish line. One of the most freeing things I learned in the research, and honestly the hardest thing to practice in my own life, is this. Shame thrives on secrecy, silence, and judgment. It needs darkness. It needs you alone with that story. The story that says, you're the only one who feels this. Or if people knew, they'd pull away. Or this means you're not enough. Shame loves to convince us that isolation is safety. Empathy is the light that kills shame. Not sympathy, not at least statements, not fixing. Empathy is when someone looks at you and says, me too, or I get it, or even just, that makes sense. And I'm not saying that makes the pain disappear. What it does is dismantle the lie that shame is telling you about who you are. The moment your experience is met with understanding, shame starts to lose its grip. And here's what's important. Empathy doesn't have to come from a crowd. It comes from the right people. Shame resilience is not about broadcasting your life to everyone and hoping for kindness. It's about having 2 or 3 safe humans you can call when shame shows up and say, oh, hey, I'm in that place. I need to tell you the story I'm telling myself. And they help you reality check it, breathe through it, not spiral inside it, because shame resilience is a practice. It's a set of moves we learn, not a personality trait we're born with. The first move is recognizing shame when it's happening, like in your body and your thoughts, and that sudden urge to hide or lash out or numb. The second move is naming it, literally putting language to it. I'm feeling ashamed right now. The third move is reaching out to someone who can meet you with empathy. And the fourth move is speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you love, not letting the inner critic run the whole meeting. And I want to be clear. This doesn't mean we stop taking responsibility. Empathy is not a free pass. Empathy is what makes responsibility possible without self-destruction. When we're drowning in shame, we don't learn, we don't grow, we don't repair, we just hide. But when we're met with empathy, even our own empathy toward ourselves, we can say, yeah, I messed up, or yeah, that hurt, or yeah, I'm scared, and still hold on to the truth that we're worthy of love and belonging. So the opposite of shame isn't pride or perfection, it's connection. And daring greatly in everyday life means this: when shame shows up, and it will, we don't armor up and go silent. We reach for empathy. We reach for people. We reach for the truth. And little by little, that's how shame stops being the thing that decides what we do next. Wholehearted living is a daily choice to show up from worthiness. And I want to slow that down because those words can sound lofty, like something we put on a mug and nod at. But what I mean is actually very down to earth. I mean that the way we live bravely is not by waiting until we feel confident or flawless or fully healed, but by deciding over and over that we are worthy of showing up as we are right now. Most of us were handed a different roadmap. The old map says, prove yourself first, earn belonging, hustle for approval, be perfect, and then you can relax. So we walk around with this quiet, relentless belief that worthiness is something you achieve at the finish line. Like if you get the job, lose the weight, fix the relationship, finally figure out your anxiety, stop needing anything, then you'll be enough. Then you'll be safe to be seen. But here's the problem. There is no finish line. The finish line keeps moving, and living that way is exhausting because you're not living from your heart. You're living from your fear of being judged, fear of disappointing people, fear of not measuring up. And fear is a terrible life coach. It keeps you in the cheap seats of your own life, analyzing, planning, perfecting, waiting. Wholehearted living flips that script. It says, I'm enough right now, not I'm perfect. Not I have it all together, just I'm a human being who is worthy of love and belonging, even while I'm learning. And that foundation changes everything, because when you start from worthiness, courage becomes possible. You can step into the arena without needing a guarantee. You can try and fail and still feel whole. You can have a hard conversation and not make the outcome your identity. And this is not a one-time switch you flip. This is a practice. Some days you wake up and worthiness feels natural. Other days you wake up and the old scarcity story is already running in your head like a news ticker. You're behind. You're not doing enough. You're not as good as they are. Wholehearted living on those days looks like making a different choice anyway. It's saying, I hear that story, but I'm not letting it drive. In everyday life, showing up from worthiness is tiny, gritty, beautiful work. It's walking into a meeting and sharing your idea, even if your voice shakes.